Welcome back to the OSM channel. Have you ever been in the market for a new tool? You look up that tool on Amazon and find, oh, they have reconditioned versions of that tool. They cost half to one-third the cost of what the tool cost new. I wonder if they're any good. Well, we're going to try and answer that question today. Today, I have something special. I have a reconditioned Bosch RH540MRT combination rotary hammer drill, and I'm very excited to pull this out of the box and test it out. We're going to see how this does drilling through some hard rock today. So let's go over the features of this tool real quick. Retail cost brand new. I want to say this tool costs $500 to $600, but refurbished, I think they're going for around $250 right now. So that's some significant savings. With this tool, I believe it also comes with a 1-year warranty. Now this is a combination tool, meaning it does hammer, which you can just hammer with this tool, but it also has a rotary hammer function, and that's really what I'm going to be using most of the time with this drill because we're going to be drilling through rock. The tool weighs 15 pounds and it has an SDS Max chuck. Delivers 8.2 joules of energy, and again, I believe it comes with a 1-year warranty. Before we unbox this tool and put it to work, I want to talk about the different types of shanks. But before we talk about the different types of shanks, I just want to talk about what I plan to do with this tool. So, as already mentioned, I mainly plan to drill through rock. You know, over the late fall, I built a dry stack stone wall. I split stones manually, and there were a lot of big stones that I wanted to split, but I just didn't have the ability to do so. Now with this rotary hammer drill, it's going to allow me to drill large holes into large chunks of rock, and then I also bought this feather and wedge set. So we're going to drill into rock, and we're going to split some big chunks of rock in half. But you can do a lot more than just drilling into rock and masonry items with this drill. Of course, you can set it into the hammer-only mode, and you can purchase attachments such as this. Check this out. This is a spade, right? Like my area, we have hard, packed, clay, rocky soil, and trying to get a shovel through that soil, it can be challenging at times. So, you know, you break out this tool with this big spade bit, loosen everything up, and then it becomes a lot easier to shovel everything out of your hole. You know, they sell attachments such as grounding rod drivers. So when electricians need to drive in, you know, a 6 to 8 foot long grounding rod, they'll have a tool like this with that driver attachment to drive that rod into the ground. They also have, of course, chisels. You can chisel up tile, other masonry things. They have point chisels. You can bust apart concrete. So you get the idea. This tool opens up a lot of doors, allows me to take on other side jobs, but I think mainly we're going to use this around the property here to split up rock, and I do have some big projects planned for the future. So if you're in the market for a rotary hammer drill, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what do I plan to do with this, and how frequently do I plan to use this? And then you kind of have to set your budget. So for example, if you just needed to set maybe a few Tapcon screws into some concrete that really doesn't have any rebar, you'd probably get by with a straight shank bit and your standard cordless drill that is equipped with the hammer drill function, which this is pretty much useless when you're trying to go through rock. You will spend probably 20 minutes trying to drill like a 1/4 inch hole through some hard granite with a tool like this. It doesn't deliver that much energy. In fact, the approximate joules that a cordless hammer drill such as this delivers really isn't that measurable. It's basically a rotary drill with a little vibration mode. So this will get you by for a few projects, but if you're trying to do any type of serious construction, you do not want a straight shank bit. You want to get something more purpose-built. Next, we move up to general duty. SDS Plus, that's kind of like the construction industry standard. If you're setting like 3/8 inch anchor bolts, this is a great choice for you. If you want to move up a step from there, you can go to the SDS Max. You know, when you're starting to drill through some really hard rock, granite, concrete with rebar, large holes, you know, you're setting 3/4 inch anchor bolts regularly, then you want to move up to the SDS Max and possibly spline drive. Next, let's talk about joules. Now, joules is a measurement of energy, and basically the higher the joule level, the more energy that tool will transfer from itself to the bit, thus getting more work done. So, you know, as you go up in bit class, the amount of joules that that specific hammer drill is designed to output increases. So obviously with a spline drive type rotary hammer drill, it's going to get a lot more work done, but it's also going to use up more electricity. So again, you have to take all these things into consideration when you're deciding what rotary hammer drill type bit shank is correct for your application. So when I was selecting this tool, I asked myself, what's the intended application of this tool and how frequently do I plan to use it? Well, I'm going to be drilling some pretty large holes into hard rock, 5/8 inch holes for those feather and wedges. So I knew I needed a heavy duty or extreme duty tool, so that's why I went with the SDS Max. Now, cordless versus corded, this tool is corded. It makes more economical sense. This tool is rebuildable. I can get parts for it. You know, when you start talking about cordless hammer drills, if you go above SDS Plus, it gets very expensive because you almost have to have multiple batteries in that tool, and then really you should have 2 sets of batteries, so you're talking about 4 or 6 amp hour batteries. You got to keep them charged up. It gets very expensive very quickly, so worst case scenario, I'll just bring a generator to the work area. But I also have a very heavy duty 100-foot extension cord that should do me just fine for most applications around here. Factory reconditioned. Now it does say 1-year repair warranty, but that is underneath the Amazon sticker. I wonder if they did that intentionally. Let's pull this bad boy out of the box and see what a factory reconditioned tool looks like from Bosch. Low molded case, a few scrapes, very clean otherwise. I'm not really too concerned about the case. That really looks good as new. What a beast. I have to say, it's hard to believe that this is a reconditioned tool because this looks pretty much brand new. Of course, we'll have to see how well it performs, but it says right there, Bosch Factory Reconditioned. Cool. About 15 pounds. So far, I'm impressed. Now, in the case, you receive a tube of shank lubricant. This is actually made in Germany. Of course, we have our owner's / instruction manual. As for the tool itself, again, this is in great condition. Have a heavy duty switch in the back of the tool. This is a variable speed tool, not by way of the trigger. The trigger is either on or off, but we have our speed adjustment controller right here. It's like settings 1 through 6. We have an adjustable handle. In order to loosen up the handle, we would rotate the handle counterclockwise, and then we could spin this around in any direction, so it doesn't matter if you're right-handed or left-handed. Now, I will say one thing I wish this tool had that it doesn't have, not the end of the world, but it doesn't have a depth gauge rod. On a lot of the hammer drills, they'll have a depth gauge rod, so you set the rod back from the tip of the bit, and then when your bit goes down as far as you allow it to with that set point rod, of course the tool will stop drilling. So you know, you could set your holes at 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch. This doesn't have that. It's not a huge deal. We could just mark off our bit with tape, which I'm splitting rocks. It's not a huge deal. It doesn't have to be that precise, but it'd be nice to get my holes about even. On the top of the tool, we have the control knob. Now, when the control knob is forward, that is the hammer drill mode. If we rotate the control knob 180 degrees, that is our hammer only mode. So if we're using the spade bit to go through hard soil, you would position this in the hammer only mode. Now, from my understanding, when you're using a chisel, like if you're chiseling up tile or something like that, you can adjust this left and right, and that will control the angle at which the bit sits in the head, if I understand that correctly, which that's not a feature that I really need right now, so not really going to mess around with that. But that's the basic overview of the tool. Let's plug it in and see if it works. Power cord is nice and long, probably 8 to 10 feet. Oh yeah. Brushed motor. Thing is beastie. Now let's try installing this bit into the chuck. Now again, this is an SDS Max bit. I believe there's only one way that this lines up into the chuck, so we're probably going to have to spin this around until we get it lined up. As opposed to an SDS Plus bit, I believe there's 2 different ways that that will line up in the chuck. Now I will grease this after I take it out, but I just want to try and get it in there the first time. Let's rotate this around, try and get it lined up. There we go. So lined up right there. I pulled back the collar, put the bit all the way back, let go on the collar, And now that's locked in there, and we have about an inch of throw. So this should definitely do some serious drilling. Let's lubricate this bit and we'll install it back in the chuck. There we go. All right, I think we're ready to test this tool out. I have a rock here that I'd like to split in half. I believe this is gneiss, which has a similar hardness to granite. I think it's probably about 8 inches in depth. My plan is to drill 3 holes, and then we will use these wedge and feathers and try and split this rock in half. All I have to say is, wow, that was incredible. It went through this rock very quickly. Mind you, this is pretty hard stuff. And what I'm most impressed with is I didn't really feel much vibration resonating into my hand. The anti-vibration system on this tool is incredible. Absolutely incredible. So I actually ended up drilling 4 holes. 1, 2, 3, 4. For some reason I forgot to hit record for the 3rd hole, so ended up doing 4, but I am just so impressed with that tool. I've learned that you should put a slight amount of downward pressure on the tool, but after you do that, I mean, the tool does all the work. It's incredible compared to what I've been trying to do in the past with my cordless drill with the hammer function and a straight shank bit. This is just a whole new ball game. I'm gently gonna hit each plug one at a time. And the name of the game here is slow, steady, and even pressure. You don't want to start wailing on one because that could cause things to fracture unevenly, and that's not what we want. So, light taps. See, we have a nice fault line now. Gneiss doesn't seem to fracture very nicely. I don't know why they call it gneiss, but this rock wasn't ideal. I just wanted to test things out here, but we have a fault. It's not exactly where we wanted it, but we do have a nice fault now. So let's try and wedge this open. There we go. Probably could have used a few more holes in here, but try and get my wedges out of here. Look at that. Oh, that opens up so many doors. That's awesome. I am just so impressed with this tool. It took, what, maybe 30 seconds to drill each hole down 2.5 inches. And then with those wedges, 4 wedges, 4 feathers and wedges, you know, light taps, and this thing fractured apart with such ease. This is a total game changer. Now, the reason this works so well is because rock is similar to concrete. You know, both are excellent at compressive loads under tension. Rock and concrete tend to split apart. That's why concrete is reinforced with rebar and fiberglass, but it's just so impressive what can be done when you have the right tools. With that, I'm going to conclude this video. Now, I give this rotary hammer drill, so far, this is 10 out of 10 stars. Absolutely incredible piece of engineering here. So be on the lookout for future videos because I'm sure we're going to be splitting a lot more rock. I'd like to thank you for watching. I'll leave a link for this in the description down below, and I'll catch you on the next one.